Welcome back to our remote cooking class, everyone. Today we're going to work on our chicken noodle soup, and to me the most exciting part about this is that we're making noodles from scratch. So I'm starting out with my flour. I have 1 1/4 cups of flour in a bowl. The first direction is to make a well, and that's where we're going to add our eggs. So I'm going to just push some flour away to the middle. So making kind of like a little bed for those eggs to go in. So we have 2 eggs here. These are already, we are using like a box pasteurized egg for this. If you were using 2 eggs, I would recommend actually crack them in a separate bowl and beat them first so they're nice and well combined. So I'm going to just add that in. And I'm going to start mixing, but I'm going to need some water to kind of get this into a dough-like state. So mixing. We don't want the dough to be sticky, so I'm going to add just a little bit at a time when I start adding that water. Alright, so now I have the egg combined. And I will literally use a tablespoon here. So I'm going to take the biggest spoon on the rack, 1 tablespoon. I'm just going to add in 1. And we'll keep mixing and see how that looks. Alright, and we're getting actually pretty close. So as you can see in my bowl, and you might need more or less than I'm using for water. That's normal. A lot of it depends on a lot of really very minor things that we wouldn't even think of normally, but like the humidity in your house and things like that. So this is still a little too stiff to become a ball. I'm going to add 1 more tablespoon of water, and I think I'll have as much as I need. And you do want a stiff dough though, so it's all right. We don't want it to get sticky because we're going to roll it out after this. As you can see, I'm kind of cutting into this a little bit. Alright, and now I have it. It's come together into kind of a ball. A touch sticky. I'm going to throw some extra flour on my cutting board, or if you have a clean counter, you can do it here. If you've just used cleaning spray on your counter and you're going to use your counter, I'd actually wipe it off 1 more time with a damp, clean paper towel, and then dry it again before you put the flour on. Just because you don't want any cleaning supplies or sanitizer in your pasta. So I'm just going to make sure that I have this pretty well covered with the flour. That way it's not going to stick to my rolling pin. If you don't have a rolling pin, you could use a straight-sided glass or bottle for this. I'm just going to start rolling it out. I'm going to roll a couple times and then flip it. I'm getting a little bit of a lip over here, so I want to turn it. And you don't need it super thin. We're not making like really flat spaghetti or lasagna noodles. These are to go right in our soup, so it's going to be great, but they can be a little thicker, When I was a kid, my mom used to make this. I loved it. If it starts to stick a little, add a little bit of flour. But we called the noodles that you put directly into the soup sliders for some reason. It was just what my family called them. But one of my favorite dinners. Alrighty. So I I have it as thin as I want on this side, but this side still needs to get a little bit thinner, so I'm going to flip it one more time. And if it starts to break, you know, if I have some practice with flipping this dough, that's okay, but if it breaks, don't worry. It doesn't have to look, you know, perfect. This is going right into our soup once we have it cut and it rests. So I just want something that we can enjoy and like the taste of, not so much that it has to look perfect or exactly uniform. All right, so that's it. So we've made our cutter pasta dough made and rolled out. Next we're going to be cutting this. So this is cut into about 1/4 1/2 inch strips, about 3 to 5 inches long. I'm just taking a large knife and I'm going to start with my strips. A really, another good idea for a tool for this would be a pizza cutter. It would be easy to do. It doesn't need to be a sharp knife. I picked this one solely because it's big. It's easier to do a nice long cut with. And I'm going to cut mine a little shorter, so it did say 3 to 5 inches long. I like them if they fit nicely on our spoon. So I'm going to cut mine probably just to 1 inch long. So a lot like cutting our produce, I'm cutting all of my cuts in one direction, and then I will spin this and cut in the other direction. So remember, I don't have to now do an uncomfortable handhold. I can move the food. So I'm actually just going to turn this around. And like I said, I'm going for more of like a 1 inch. Sometimes you don't want to modify a recipe, but this one, it'll be all right. Change our size. I did try to make these relatively uniform so that they cook about the same. Okay. One more cup. All right, so now that I have these little noodles prepared, I'm actually just going to let them rest for a while. So they're just going to sit here, and that helps the proteins and the flour kind of do their thing. I'll wash my hands and come back and we'll get the broth going. All right. So for our next step, we're going to get the broth going. This is still resting. We'll start with, we're using bouillon. So I'm going to add water. So instead of just this, normally you'd use a box of chicken stock. That's about the amount that it's calling for. But we're going to do this with bouillon because that's what we had on hand. So we're going to use 4 cups of water here. And 4 bouillon cubes, and I'm adding also in our salt and pepper. And I'm going to turn this up nice and high. It's going to take a little while for this to boil. And it also calls for an additional 3 cups of water. Kind of a nice thing. A lot of times at home I'll use a very low sodium or no salt added chicken stock. This one, using the bouillon, having the extra water, I think will help because the bouillon's pretty salty, but the flavor will really permeate and the water won't be as diluting as it might be otherwise. So we're just going to let that come to a boil, and then we're going to add in our noodles after about 10 minutes. All right, guys, so we have our stock is boiling now in water. We're going to be adding our pasta, and I'm just going to slide it in a little bit at a time. You want to keep the pieces kind of separate, but once they're into that boiling water, they'll start to cook. Okay. I'm just going to very gently kind of disturb the noodles in here so they're not all stuck together. I'm going to add our 2 cups of mixed vegetables. There we go. And our cooked chicken. We're going to get this mixture back up to a nice boil and let that go for 12 to 15 minutes. Just pull out when you think it's ready one of your noodles on your spoon. Trying to catch just the noodle and none of those vegetables I just tossed in. And you just simply put it on the tray, let it cool a tiny bit, and then take a taste. If it's nice and tender, you're good to go. So that's it. Enjoy.